Hey guys, this is Ash and you're watching Writer-Ash. So today I'm doing my July/Maassive Readathon 2021 TBR. So I was unaware of the Maassive Readathon back in 2021, so I didn't participate back then. And I missed out on quite an amazing readathon. And I was like, I'm gonna make up for it by doing it in July after having such an amazing time in June with this year's Maassive Readathon. In July, it was based on the Akatar world, and you got to pick a court you got to be a citizen of, and it was just fantastic, and I just had to do it. So, when faced with the choice of the courts, I was between Night Court, because that is the court we're most familiar with, and I quite love Valaris, and the Day Court, because that's the one I identify with more. And after much thought to that, I decided to go with the Day Court because while the Night Court is great, it's just Valaris that I love and not the entirety of the Night Court, because the Night Court is quite scary. And I feel like as a person, I would enjoy Hillian's rule and his court a lot better. And for me, the Day Court would be the better fit. So with that in mind, I decided to jump into this readathon. So the point of this readathon is to, one, get your citizenship, and then you travel through Prithian if you would like. You could just stop at getting your citizenship, but you could go to a different court, or you could go to these specific sites at these different courts as well. And I decided I want to do it all. So I will be double counting books because that is allowed for this readathon, and I'll only be counting one book for 2 prompts at the most. I'm trying to make sure there's a path to each of the places I'm trying to go to, so I'm gonna have to do my best to make sure that happens. So let's start with the Day Court. So for Day Court, you have to read 3 books to get your citizenship. And well, you have to finish 3 prompts, not 3 books, which is what I'm not going to be doing. Prompt number 1 is to read a book with diverse representation, for which I'll be reading Honey and Spice, which is a book coming out in July. I'm super excited about it. It's been on my TBR on Goodreads for a while. Prompt number 2 is to read a book that starts with the letter H, which I will be reading Honey and Spice for. Prompt number 3 is to be reading a book with an assassin, which I'll be reading Shadow and Death. It is the next book in the In Death series that's on my TBR, and it has assassin. That's the main killer. And it's in the synopsis, so we know that right off the bat. So the next thing I want to do after getting my citizenship, or at some point, is go to the library of the Day Court, and for that, I have to read a nonfiction book. That was a tough one for me. I dislike reading nonfiction. I think the only nonfiction book I've actually ever read is Miles to Go, Miley Cyrus's biography when I was a kid. But that is it for my nonfiction history. So I was like, I can't jump into something too much, so I'm gonna do a kid's book because I enjoyed reading some kids' book last month. So I found this book called She Persisted, 13 American Women Who Changed the World by Chelsea Clinton. I thought it was super fitting for everything that's happening around the world to remind myself that there are these amazing women that have paved the way for so many generations to come. After getting my citizenship and visiting the library, I want to go to the Night Court. To visit the Night Court, I have to read a book with enemies to lovers, and I also want to go to the Illyrian Mountains, which is to read a book with the bed sharing tropes. So how I'm going to go about it is I'm going to be reading 1 book for each place. That includes the prompt for visiting the place and the prompt for the special location in the place, or the special event I'm going to. For that, I'm going to be reading The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. It is about this, it's kind of a enemies to lovers book, and I was super excited about it because I read the first book in the series and I loved it, absolutely adored it. So I was like, yes. And then I was looking on Goodreads for bed sharing tropes, and this was recommended, so I was like, yes, that works perfectly. Okay, so the next place I would go to is the Dawn Court, my court's other neighbor. And for that, I'll have to read a book with healers. And that I'm going to be reading Dating Dr. Dill, which is written by an Indian author and has Indian characters and has doctor. The next place I'll be going to is the middle. So for the middle, there is the Middle Safari. For that, you have to read a book with an important symbol on the cover. And with it just being Pride Month last month, I wanted their Pride flag to be on the cover. For that, I'm going to be reading Pride, the Story of Harvey Milk and the Rainbow Flag. It is a kid's book and it is a picture book, but I'm excited for it because I've seen the Harvey Milk movie and I really loved his story. So I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good book for this prompt. So the next place I'll be going to is the Winter Court, and for that I have to read a book with royalty, and then to visit Callias's palace I have to read the next book on my TBR while drinking a wintry beverage. So I'm thinking hot chocolate or a tea, and I'll be reading Tokyo Dreaming for that. I read Tokyo Ever After, the first book in that series, and I loved it so much, and I was very excited for the second book, and I finally made space for it on my TBR. The next place I'll be going is the Summer Court, for which I have to read a colorful book, which is up to interpretation. And then for the Adriata Grand Tour, I have to read a sea-themed book. For that, I'll be reading The Float Plan. It has a yellow and blue vibrant cover, and I think it would be perfect for both of these prompts. And then I'll be off to the Autumn Court, which honestly, if I had to leave one court off my list, it would be the Autumn Court because barren. But honestly, the future of the Autumn Court doesn't look as bleak. So for the Autumn Court, I have to read a book that makes me feel cozy. And for the Farmlands of Autumn, I have to read a book with romantic tension. I decided to go with Built to Last. It is an arc I have from NetGalley for this one. It is a contemporary romance, which always gives me cozy feels. And it would be perfect to read for the romantic tension because it sounds like it has some of that from the description. It's about childhood lovers coming back together, or like there's some ex situation involved. I think she was dating someone and he is friend, and all three of them are friends, and now this story is about the other two people. I'm not sure. We'll see, but regardless, it sounds like it's gonna have a romantic tension. And that brings us to our final location, which is the Spring Court, for which I have to read about a character in disguise. And for the Missing Wall, I have to read a book with monsters. For this one, I decided to go with Spin the Dawn, which was the readathon book last year. At first I wasn't thinking of reading it, but then I decided, why not do the whole thing? And I added it there because it's a Mulan retelling, which means it's got disguises. And from the sound of the second book, there's some monster element. And at the very least, there's gonna be a villain, and villains are monsters. So up to my own interpretation. So that is it for my TBR for July, and I am super excited to jump into the Maassive Readathon 2021 in 2022.